Abony stepped into the compound with her heart full of hope and trembling dreams. The morning sun cast golden light over the mud walls, and the sound of drums still echoed faintly from the distant hills where her wedding had taken place the day before. She carried with her a small wooden chest, inside it the last gifts from her mother, a beaded comb, a strip of red cloth for blessings and a folded note of prayer. Her husband, Kalu, walked beside her, tall and quiet, his face composed in the calm way of men who have learned not to show their hearts. As they reached the center of the compound, women from the household came out to greet them. The air smelled of palm oil and smoke from the cooking hearths. Some smiled politely, others whispered behind their hands. But one figure stood still at the doorway, her gaze sharp as a blade. It was Mama Igioma, Kalu's mother, the matriarch of the house, dressed in deep blue cloth that shimmered like river water. Her head wrap sat high and proud, her eyes hard as iron. "So this is the bride," she said slowly, her voice low and heavy with judgment. "You have brought her home, Kalu. Let us see if she knows how to keep a home." Abony lowered her head respectfully, her hands clasped before her. "Good evening, Mama," she said softly. "I am honored to serve and learn." Mama Igioma's lips curved into a smile that did not touch her eyes. "We shall see," she murmured, then turned away, calling for one of the servants to show the new bride her quarters. The room Abony was given was small, its window covered with raffia, and though the bed was clean, it smelled faintly of dust. She sat quietly for a moment, her heart racing with the weight of the unknown. Outside, laughter floated through the courtyard. She could hear Kalu's voice among the men as they shared kola nuts and stories, yet he did not come to check on her. When night fell, Kalu finally entered. His expression was tired, his hands smelling of palm wine. He smiled faintly and sat beside her. "You must understand my mother," he said in a low voice. "She lost much before I was born. She is protective of this house. Do not take her words to heart." Abony nodded, though his tone was more weary than comforting. She reached for his hand but found it limp, uncertain. A silence settled between them, filled only by the chirping of night insects. In the days that followed, Abony rose before dawn to sweep the compound and fetch water from the stream. The other women watched her, whispering when she passed. Mama Igioma would sit on her wooden stool, inspecting everything Abony did, the way she tied her wrapper, the way she pounded yam, even the way she greeted guests. Each time Abony tried to please her, something was wrong. "The broom should move with both hands, not one," Mama Igioma would scold. "Do you not know the way of this house?" "Yes, Mama," Abony would answer softly, swallowing her tears. At night, when she lay beside Kalu, she whispered her fears to him. "Your mother does not like me," she said once, her voice trembling. Kalu sighed and turned away. "She will in time," he said. "Just be patient." But patience was not what Mama Igioma wanted. Her silence was like smoke, thick, suffocating, creeping into every corner of Abony's heart. Still, Abony tried. She sang softly as she worked, sent food to her husband's friends, and smiled even when exhaustion bent her back. Yet the coldness in her mother-in-law's eyes never thawed. Behind that stare lay something deeper, an envy that Abony could not name, a darkness that stirred like an old wound waiting to reopen. And though Abony could not yet see it, her arrival had awakened a storm that would soon tear through the peace she hoped to build. The next morning, before the cock crowed twice, Abony was already outside the compound sweeping the yard. The moon was still hanging pale in the sky, and the cold air made her fingers stiff. She had not yet eaten, but Mama Igioma's voice cut through the dawn like the call of a restless bird. "Abony, the water jars are empty. Are you waiting for the ancestors to fill them?" Abony dropped her broom and hurried to fetch the clay pots. She walked the long path to the stream barefoot, the ground cool beneath her feet, her back aching from yesterday's work. The stream glimmered softly, and for a brief moment she paused to breathe, watching her reflection ripple in the water. The girl who stared back at her looked tired but still carried the glow of gentleness. She whispered a small prayer and began filling the pots. When she returned, sweat running down her temples, Mama Igioma stood waiting by the kitchen fire. "You are slow," she said. "If the ancestors had moved at your pace, this family would have died of thirst long ago." Abony bit her lip, nodded, and said nothing. That day Mama Igioma assigned her to pound yam for the entire household, an amount fit for 10 men. The pestle felt heavier than before, and her palms soon blistered. Still, she worked until her arms trembled. When the food was finally ready, Mama Igioma tasted it, frowned, and spat into the sand. "Too soft. You must not know the hand of a proper wife." Kalu, who had just entered, froze. His eyes flicked from his mother to his wife. Ebony looked at him, silently pleading for just one word of comfort. But Kalu looked away and muttered, "I'll eat it later," before retreating to his room. It was the first time Ebony felt the weight of loneliness press so deeply on her chest. She had married a man she thought would protect her, but now she stood alone against his mother's storms. As the days turned into weeks, the tests grew harsher. Mama Igioma sent her to the market during the hottest hours of the day, demanding specific items that were nearly impossible to find. When Ebony returned with her headload of goods, she would be accused of overspending or bringing the wrong things. One afternoon, when guests arrived, Mama Igioma called for Ebony to serve them. The stew she prepared was rich with spice and aroma, yet her mother-in-law took a spoonful, sniffed it and said coldly, "Did you add too much salt so they will choke? Or is this how your people cook when they want to poison a house?" The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Ebony's face burned with shame, but she forced herself to bow and whisper, "Forgive me, Mama." When the guests left, Kalu entered the kitchen, his voice low. "You must try harder, Ebony," he said. "My mother means well." "Means well?" Her voice cracked as she turned to him. "She humiliates me before everyone. You see it, Kalu. Why won't you speak?" He rubbed his forehead, weary. "If I speak, she will turn against me. You don't know her strength." "So I must suffer in silence because you are afraid?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. But Kalu had no answer. He only sighed and left, the sound of his footsteps fading into the courtyard. That night, Ebony sat by the window, the moonlight spilling over her face. Her hands were raw from work, her back sore, her spirit trembling. In the silence, she heard her mother's voice in memory, "Patience is not weakness, my child. But if you must bend, bend like the reed, not the tree that breaks." So she decided to endure. She would learn the rhythm of the house, the sharp turns of Mama Igioma's moods. She would listen, observe, and wait for her moment to rise. But Mama Igioma was not done testing her. The older woman watched Ebony with the cold satisfaction of a hunter studying prey. Each time Ebony smiled, she found another reason to make her suffer. And though Ebony did not yet understand it, these trials were only the beginning, the small fires before the true blaze that would soon consume the peace of the household. In the months that followed, Ebony's beauty became the quiet talk of the village. It was not the kind of beauty born of wealth or jewels, but of grace, the calm way she moved, the gentle way her laughter softened even the air around her. Yet above all, people spoke of her hair. It was long, thick, and dark as night water, woven into intricate braids that shimmered when the sun touched them. The village women often stopped her on the way to the stream, admiring it with awe. "Ebony, your hair must be blessed by your ancestors," they would say. "Not even the chief's daughters wear it so fine." Ebony would smile modestly, tucking a loose braid behind her ear. "It is only hair," she'd reply softly. But in her heart, she knew it carried a memory, her late mother's last blessing. Before her wedding, her mother had run her fingers through it and whispered, "This hair carries our blood's strength. Never let it be shamed." When the wind blew through the compound, her braids danced like dark silk ribbons. Even the young men in the marketplace would glance her way, whispering to one another that Kalu was lucky, that his wife was the kind of woman poets spoke about in moonlight songs. But where others saw beauty, Mama Igioma saw a challenge. She began to watch Ebony more closely, her eyes narrowing each time her daughter-in-law's hair caught the sun. She would mutter under her breath, "A wife should tie her head in humility, not parade her pride for men to see." One evening, when the family sat together outside, the elders praised Ebony's diligence. "She is respectful," one of them said, smiling. "And truly the gods blessed her with beauty. That hair of hers, it is like the night sky itself." Mama Igioma's lips tightened. "Beauty fades," she said coldly. "What matters is obedience." The conversation died after that, the laughter stifled. Kalu looked away, pretending not to notice the sharp edge in his mother's tone. But Ebony felt the sting in every word. Later that night, Mama Igioma entered her room without warning. Ebony was seated before a small mirror, oiling her scalp gently. "Still tending to that pride of yours?" the older woman asked. Ebony turned quickly. "No, Mama. I was only what? Trying to tempt spirits with your vanity? A good wife covers her head, Ebony. The hair of a proud woman brings ruin to her husband's house." Ebony's hands froze. "I mean no harm, Mama. It was my mother's." "Do not speak of your mother in this house," Mama Igioma interrupted sharply. "Her ways were not our ways. I will not have her shadow teaching rebellion under my roof." The words sank like stones into Ebony's chest. She lowered her gaze, whispering a trembling apology. From that night onward, Mama Ijeoma began a quiet campaign. She told the other women that Ebony's beauty was dangerous, that it made men foolish and women envious. Soon, whispers began to circle like vultures, that Ebony charmed her husband with spells hidden in her hair, that she carried secret pride beneath her humble smiles. When Ebony walked through the market, she could feel the shift. The stares that once held admiration now carried suspicion. Even the children grew hesitant to touch her braids. But Ebony said nothing. She continued to braid her hair each morning with quiet dignity, never knowing that her crown of beauty had already become a target. And in the heart of the compound, Mama Ijeoma's bitterness thickened like smoke, dark, slow, and hungry, waiting for the moment to strike and cut the pride she could not control. You said. The morning began like any other, warm and golden, the air humming with the sounds of life in the compound, the pounding of yam, the chatter of women, the bleating of goats. Ebony was at the well, drawing water with calm precision, her long braids tied neatly behind her. The sun caught in the strands, turning them into streaks of light. Mama Ijeoma stood in the shade of the veranda, watching her. Her eyes followed every movement, burning with quiet resentment. By now, the whispers she had planted in the village had grown like weeds. Some said Ebony's beauty came from charms, others that her hair was enchanted to trap men's eyes. Each rumor fed Mama Ijeoma's hatred, until jealousy hardened into something cruel. That afternoon, when the men gathered in the courtyard to discuss the coming harvest, Mama Ijeoma sent for Ebony. "Bring the calabash of palm wine," she ordered, her voice sharp as a whip. Ebony obeyed, carrying the gourd carefully, her head lowered in respect. She poured the drink for each man, smiling faintly as tradition required. But as she bent to serve her mother-in-law, the older woman's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Stop." Mama Ijeoma's voice rose suddenly, drawing every gaze in the courtyard. "Do you see her, all of you? This wife who walks with her head high, whose hair glitters like the feathers of a spirit bird. You praise her beauty, yet you do not see what festers beneath it." The men shifted uneasily. Kalu frowned, startled. "Mother, what are you saying?" Mama Ijeoma released Ebony's hand and stood tall. "I am saying this woman has brought shame into my house. Her pride stinks of witchcraft. She thinks her hair makes her better than her husband's people. Even the children whisper that she charms men with it." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Ebony's knees trembled. "Mama, that is not true," she said softly. "I have done nothing wrong." "Silence." Mama Ijeoma barked. "You will not speak lies before your elders. You hide behind false humility, but your hair tells the truth. You worship your reflection more than the spirits who gave you breath." Kalu took a step forward. "Mother, please." But she ignored him. "No son of mine will live under a witch's spell." She turned to the servants. "Bring me a knife." The air went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Mama, please." Ebony cried, stepping back, her voice trembling. "It is just hair, it harms no one." "Then you will not miss it," Mama Ijeoma hissed. Two women grabbed Ebony's arms, holding her as the older woman lifted the blade. Ebony's heart pounded in her chest, her breath short and sharp. The edge of the knife gleamed under the sun, cruel and final. With one swift motion, Mama Ijeoma sliced through the braids. They fell to the ground like black rivers, one after another, until Ebony's head was bare and trembling. Gasps filled the courtyard. "This is not punishment," Mama Ijeoma declared, raising the knife toward the sky. "This is cleansing. Let the ancestors see her pride cut down." Ebony knelt on the dusty ground, her body shaking. The laughter of some women echoed faintly, mixed with murmurs of pity. Her vision blurred with tears. She touched her shorn head, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. But inside, beyond the pain, beyond the humiliation, something shifted, a stirring deep within her bones. It began as a whisper, faint and familiar, like the voice of her late grandmother calling from the wind. "Do not bow in shame, child. What they cut was not your glory, it was your binding." A sudden gust swept through the courtyard, scattering the fallen braids like feathers. The fire in the hearth flickered and hissed, and the elders glanced nervously at the sky. Mama Ijeoma frowned, clutching her chest. "The wind, it is only dust," she muttered, though her eyes betrayed unease. Ebony said nothing. She gathered her fallen braids in silence, her tears mixing with the earth beneath her. Her heart, once filled with fear, now pulsed with something older, something that had slept for generations and was now waking. As she rose slowly to her feet, The villagers watched in uneasy silence. For the first time, even Mama Igioma hesitated, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Abony lowered her gaze, but within her eyes, a quiet fire burned, the kind that no blade could ever cut away. Abony no longer sang in the mornings. Her laughter, once the music of the courtyard, had vanished like smoke in the harmattan wind. Days passed in eerie silence. She moved through the house like a shadow, doing her chores without complaint, her eyes distant, her shorn hair hidden beneath a cloth. The other women whispered about her, some in pity, some in fear. They said the way the air shifted when she walked was not normal, that sometimes her shadow lingered even after she had left the room. At night, the wind began to speak. It slipped through the cracks of her window, carrying whispers that felt like memory. Abony would wake, her body trembling, her heart filled with something she couldn't name. The dreams always came then, her grandmother, Mama Chica, standing beneath a great tree, her white wrapper glowing faintly. Her voice was firm, warm, and ancient. "Child," she said, "they think they have shamed you. But they have only freed what they could never understand. What they cut was not your glory, it was your binding." Abony would wake with tears drying on her cheeks, her heart thudding like distant drums. She didn't fully understand the message, but the words rooted deep inside her, growing stronger each time the dream returned. During the day, strange things began to happen. The clay pots Abony touched didn't crack under heat anymore. The plants she watered flourished, even those that had once been dry and dying. When she walked past the hens, they clucked softly and bowed their heads as if recognizing something in her. Children in the compound said they saw lights around her hands in the evenings, like fireflies that wouldn't go away. Mama Igioma noticed too. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. She began to watch Abony more closely, her suspicion growing. "You think your silence hides your pride?" she hissed one morning. "But I see you. I see what you're trying to become." Abony said nothing. She only looked at her, calm but unyielding. For the first time, Mama Igioma felt a flicker of unease. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Abony dreamt again. This time, her grandmother was closer, her face solemn. "The storm is coming, my child," she whispered. "And you must decide, will you hide from it or walk through it?" When Abony woke, the wind had entered her room once more, circling gently around her. It lifted her scarf, brushed against her short hair, and for the first time since the day of her shame, she smiled. It was deep in the night when Abony first heard the murmurs. The moon hung low and red, the air thick with the smell of palm oil and wood smoke. She had risen quietly to fetch water, careful not to wake anyone. But as she passed near the family shrine behind the compound, voices drifted through the air, familiar voices, low and deliberate. She froze behind the kola tree, her heart pounding. It was Mama Igioma, her tone sharp but almost reverent. "The time has come," she said. "The gods will not be denied another season. Her shame has marked her, she carries the sign." Another voice, older and hoarse, replied. It was the village priest, Nadi. "The spirits are restless. A sacrifice must be made before the next full moon. The woman whose beauty was cut will serve as the bridge between flesh and spirit. Her suffering makes her pure." Abony's breath caught in her throat. They were talking about her. Mama Igioma's voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from excitement. "Our family has fallen behind," she said. "Since Kalu's father died, the land has given less, the goats fewer young. This ritual will restore our name. My son will prosper again." The priest gave a slow, approving hum. "Then it is decided. On the night of the new moon she will be offered at the river. Her silence will please the ancestors." Abony clutched her water pot, her body rigid with disbelief. The world seemed to tilt around her. They had taken her dignity and now they meant to take her life. She backed away quietly, every step a battle between panic and control. The night creatures watched, owls blinking from trees, crickets falling silent as if the earth itself held its breath. Back inside her small room, Abony sat on the floor, shaking. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "They think they have shamed you. But they have only freed what they could never understand." Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes burned with a new fire. She began to piece together what she had heard. The dark ritual. She remembered stories from her childhood of ancient sacrifices made to bind spirits to a family's fortune. But those were tales told to frighten children, not deeds of the living. And yet here it was breathing in her own house. In the following days Mama Igioma grew strangely kind. She brought Abony food, spoke softly, even allowed her to rest from the hardest chores. To anyone else it looked like reconciliation. But Abony knew better. The kindness was the calm before the trap. One afternoon, while sweeping near the gate, she saw Kalu standing under the mango tree, talking to his mother. His face was pale, uncertain. She couldn't hear his words, but she saw the way he looked at her afterward, eyes full of sorrow, not love. He knew. That night, Abony didn't sleep. She sat by her window, staring at the dark sky. The wind came again, circling her gently, whispering secrets in tones older than language. Do not fear them, it seemed to say. What they plan for your death will awaken your destiny. Abony lifted her head slowly, her breath steady. For the first time since her arrival in that house, she no longer felt like a guest. She felt like something far older, something that had waited generations to rise. That night, Abony lay awake, her heart heavy with what she had overheard. The compound slept, the silence broken only by the distant croak of frogs and the sighing of the wind. Then a soft rustle stirred by her door, not footsteps but something older, gentler. The air thickened with a scent she hadn't smelled since childhood, crushed herbs and rain-soaked earth. Abony, the voice was soft, almost part of the wind itself. She rose, trembling. Before her, a faint glow shimmered, taking the shape of her late grandmother, tall, graceful, wrapped in white cloth that moved like mist. Her eyes glowed with warmth, yet carried the weight of centuries. Grandmother? Abony whispered, falling to her knees. My child, the spirit said, her tone both sorrowful and proud. They think they've broken you, but you were never theirs to break. You carry my blood, and with it, the gift that binds the living to the unseen. Abony's tears fell freely. They plan to kill me, she whispered. Mama Igioma and the priest, they mean to offer me to the river. The spirit's expression darkened, her form flickering like flame. Yes, the greed of the living has turned them blind to the truth. But you will not fall to their hands. The air outside shifted, and the spirit turned toward the window. There is an ancient tree beyond the edge of the forest, she said. The one whose roots twist like serpents, older than the first songs. Beneath it lies a charm I buried long ago, a relic of protection. It will answer only to you. Abony nodded, her fear giving way to resolve. What must I do? Go before the cock's first crow, the spirit instructed. Do not speak a word to anyone. The winds already carry your story and the ancestors are watching. You will see the truth reveal itself soon enough. Stay silent. Let them expose their own darkness. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, the spirit began to fade. Remember, child, silence is not weakness. It is the breath before thunder. Abony reached out, but her grandmother's form dissolved into soft light, leaving behind a faint warmth in the air. Before dawn, she slipped from her room, careful not to wake the household. The path to the forest was cloaked in mist, the moonlight filtering through the trees like silver threads. The forest hummed softly, the chorus of spirits and insects, alive and aware of her steps. At the heart of the woods stood the tree, vast and ancient, its roots coiled above the ground like sleeping serpents. Abony fell to her knees and dug her fingers into the cool earth. The soil yielded easily as if it recognized her touch. Soon, her hands brushed against something smooth, a small calabash sealed with red string. When she lifted it, the air around her trembled. A soft hum rose, vibrating through her chest, filling her with warmth and strength. Her grandmother's voice whispered again, when the time comes, it will speak for you. Abony pressed the charm to her chest, feeling its pulse align with her heartbeat. Then she covered it again with a thin layer of soil, leaving only a mark of her hand on the ground. When she returned home, the first rays of dawn stretched over the compound. Mama Igioma was already awake, her sharp eyes watching from the doorway. Abony lowered her gaze, pretending obedience. But deep within, something had shifted. Her silence was no longer fear. It was preparation. You said. The night of the ceremony arrived with an unsettling stillness. The moon hung full and pale above the compound, its light turning the earth silver. From every corner, Abony could hear the distant drumming from the village square, slow and rhythmic, a pulse that matched the trembling in her chest. Smoke from burning herbs curled through the air, and the sharp scent of camwood clung to her skin. Mama Igioma moved briskly through the courtyard, her face painted with white clay, her eyes sharp and gleaming with pride. Tonight, she told the gathered women, we cleanse the dishonor that entered this home. Her voice carried the conviction of someone who believed cruelty was righteousness. Behind her, the elders nodded solemnly, unaware of the darkness stitched into her intentions. Abony knelt by the fire, her hands steady though her heart was heavy. She had learned to hide her fear beneath layers of calm. Inside, however, she could feel something stirring, something ancient and quiet that pulsed like a second heartbeat beneath her skin. When she reached to adjust her shawl, a strand of her hair slipped loose. She froze. The hair that had been roughly cut and mocked days before now brushed against her shoulders, soft and whole again. Under the moonlight, it shimmered faintly, not gold or silver but a deep, living glow, like embers breathing in the dark. She caught her reflection in the basin beside her and gasped softly. The glow was real. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "What they cut was not your glory, it was your binding." Mama Igioma's voice pierced the moment. "Abony, bring the water." Abony rose quickly, bowing her head so her mother-in-law wouldn't see the strange light around her. She carried the calabash forward, her movements graceful, measured. Inside, she whispered to the charm hidden beneath her wrapper, feeling its warmth pulse in answer. The courtyard filled with more villagers as night deepened. They brought offerings of palm wine, goat blood, and kola nuts, laying them before the family shrine. To everyone else, this was a cleansing ritual meant to restore prosperity. Only Mama Igioma and the priest knew that it was no ordinary cleansing, it was a blood ritual that demanded a life. When the priest arrived, his eyes were clouded with age and ambition. He carried a staff carved with serpent patterns and spoke in riddles that made the crowd uneasy. "The ancestors demand balance," he intoned. "What was shamed must now be made pure." Abony bowed her head lower, pretending submission. The glow beneath her hair was hidden now by the scarf she had wrapped around it. No one saw the faint shimmer that escaped when the wind brushed by. As the drums grew louder, Kalu appeared, standing behind his mother. His face was pale, his eyes avoiding Abony's. He had heard whispers of what was to happen but lacked the courage to confront it. When his gaze met hers for a brief moment, he flinched, not from anger but from guilt. She looked back at him, her silence piercing more deeply than any accusation could. The priest began to chant, his voice low and guttural. The air thickened, heavy with smoke and expectation. "Bring the vessel," he commanded, gesturing toward Abony. Mama Igioma smirked. "She is ready." Abony stepped forward, her bare feet brushing the dust. But as she did, a sudden gust of wind swept through the compound, scattering the ashes from the fire. The villagers gasped, shielding their faces. For a moment, everything went still. The drums, the chants, even the night itself seemed to pause. Then, from beneath her scarf, a few strands of Abony's hair slipped free. They moved, alive, glinting faintly under the moonlight. The priest's chant faltered. He blinked, uncertain. Mama Igioma's expression twisted with confusion, then anger. But Abony only lowered her gaze again, hiding a quiet, knowing smile. The spirits were awake. The ritual had begun, but not the one Mama Igioma planned. The air trembled as the priest raised his staff, and Mama Igioma stepped forward, holding the ritual blade. Its metal caught the moonlight, flashing like a serpent's tongue. Abony knelt in the center of the courtyard, her head bowed, her heart pounding against her ribs. Around her, villagers formed a circle, their faces tense with awe and fear. The chant of the priest deepened, his voice rising with every verse. "Spirits of earth and river, take what is given, cleanse this house." Mama Igioma's lips curved in a cruel smile. She stood above Abony, blade poised, and declared, "Let the shame of this woman be washed away by sacrifice. Let her blood feed the fortune of our line." Her voice rang through the night, sharp and certain. She looked toward the elders, expecting their approval, their nods of respect. But before the knife could fall, the wind changed. A cold gust tore through the courtyard, scattering embers from the dying fire. The villagers gasped and drew back as the flame flickered, sputtered, and went out entirely. Only the moon remained, glowing pale and watchful. Then a low sound began, not thunder, not drums, but a hum that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The earth seemed to breathe beneath their feet. The priest stumbled back, clutching his staff. This is not part of the rite," he cried, his voice cracking. The wind rose higher, swirling dust and leaves around Abony like a living storm. Her scarf was ripped from her head, and her hair, long and full once more, streamed behind her, glowing faintly like coals fanned by unseen hands. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some fell to their knees, others fled toward the gates. Mama Igioma's eyes widened in horror. "What trickery is this?" she shouted, clutching the blade tighter. From the darkness came a voice, low, echoing, and unmistakably ancient. "You call upon the ancestors with a lying heart." The voice was not human. It filled the air, vibrating through the bones of every living thing present. The villagers froze. The priest fell to his knees, muttering incoherently. Then came another voice, older, gentler, the one Ebony knew from her dreams. "Child of my child," it said, carried by the wind. "You were never theirs to offer. Rise." Ebony lifted her head slowly. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight, and as she rose to her feet, her shadow stretched, merging with the swirling dust until it seemed she stood within a pillar of moving light. The wind circled her, lifting her hair in a halo. Mama Igioma staggered backward, her voice trembling. "No. This is witchcraft. She brings curses upon us." But the air answered her, a roar of wind that knocked the blade from her hand, sending it clattering to the ground. The fire pit reignited on its own, burning blue and fierce. In its light, faces appeared, spectral, shimmering outlines of those long gone. The ancestors. The villagers cried out in awe. Some bowed. Others covered their faces. The spirits spoke as one, their voices layered and powerful. "You cut the innocent and called it cleansing. You took life for greed and named it tradition. Your deceit has fed your house with ashes." Mama Igioma fell to her knees, her pride crumbling. "Mercy," she cried, clawing at the earth. "Forgive me, great ones. I only did what was needed to protect my family." The wind howled again, swirling around her. The ancestors' fire brightened, revealing images within the flames, visions of her sins. The stolen charms, the silenced voices, the false rituals she had performed to gather wealth. Every secret came alive before the eyes of the village. The crowd murmured, horrified. The elders turned away, their faith in her shattered. Ebony stood still, her grandmother's presence strong around her. "You called me cursed," she said softly, her voice steady yet filled with quiet power. "But it was your own curse you feared." Mama Igioma wept openly now, trembling as the fire crackled before her. The priest, overcome with terror, dropped his staff and crawled away. The villagers began to chant, not in fear but reverence. The old prayer of cleansing, the true one, the one that called for light, not blood. The fire dimmed to gold, the wind softened, and Ebony's hair fell gently back over her shoulders. The voices of the ancestors faded with the whisper of leaves, leaving behind only silence, a silence heavy with truth. When the dawn finally came, the compound stood still. The villagers knew what they had witnessed. The ritual meant to destroy had turned against its maker. Mama Igioma, once proud and feared, now knelt before the woman she had tried to destroy. And Ebony, no longer bound by shame, stood tall, the living proof that no cruelty could cut what was sacred in her. The fire still glowed faintly as the night stretched into a trembling silence. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes darting between Ebony and Mama Igioma, who lay crumpled on the ground, her body shaking. The ritual blade glinted beside her, now dull and harmless. The air hung thick with the scent of ashes and sacred oil. Then a strange quiet overtook the compound, the kind that feels alive, waiting. One by one, the elders who had stood to witness the ceremony began to sway. Their eyes rolled back and their bodies straightened unnaturally, as if held by invisible strings. The crowd gasped and stepped away. The flames rose once more, golden and clear, and from within the elders' throats came voices not their own, deep, resonant, and layered like thunder over a mountain. "We are here," the voices said together, filling every ear, every heart. "We are the keepers of the line you have defiled." The villagers fell to their knees. Even the priest pressed his forehead to the ground, trembling. The possessed elders turned toward Ebony, and the air rippled around her. "Daughter of Iphioma, granddaughter of Izenwa," the voices continued, "your blood carries the old covenant. What was bound by cruelty is now unbound by truth." Ebony felt her knees weaken. The charm beneath her wrapper grew warm, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. "I only wished for peace," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I never sought power." The elders' voices softened, almost like wind rustling through tall grass. "Power seeks not the proud but the pure. You have endured humiliation, and in your silence, you awakened the memory of your mothers. You will restore what greed destroyed." The fire flared again, and from its light stepped forth faint outlines, luminous figures draped in ancient garments, their eyes bright as stars. Among them was the spirit of Ebony's grandmother, her presence radiant and serene. She looked at her granddaughter with pride. "The blessing was always yours," she said. "They thought your beauty was vanity, but it was the reflection of light long buried." The villagers wept openly now. Mama Igioma groaned on the ground, her face streaked with tears and ash. "Forgive me," she sobbed, reaching toward the fire. "I was blind to what she carried. I feared her as I feared myself." The ancestors' voices rumbled low. "Fear is no excuse for wickedness," they said, though their tone held no cruelty, only judgment. You sought fortune by shedding innocence. Now, your fortune shall lie in dust until you learn humility. At those words, the earth beneath Mama Igioma cracked slightly, and a rush of wind swept around her. Her elaborate beads and gold ornaments fell away, scattering like broken shells. She cried out, clutching at them, but they turned to dust in her hands. Then the wind stilled, leaving her in plain cloth, trembling, small. The ancestral fire dimmed once more, shifting its light toward Ebony. Her grandmother stepped closer, her spirit flickering like dawn mist. Kneel no longer, child, she said. Rise. Ebony rose slowly, her body bathed in a golden hue. Her hair shimmered as though woven from moonlight, every strand alive with strength. The elders, still held by the spirits, bowed their heads. Let it be known, they declared, their voices now in perfect unison, that Ebony, daughter of this house, bears the blessing of restoration. Her hands shall heal. Her words shall guide. Her presence shall bring peace where deceit once ruled. The villagers echoed the declaration, chanting her name. Ebony, Ebony. Their voices rose, blending with the wind, carrying her name beyond the compound walls, into the sleeping forest. Mama Igioma lifted her head weakly, her face streaked with tears. You are my daughter now, she whispered hoarsely. Not by blood but by truth. I was wrong. Ebony looked at her, her eyes gentle yet distant. The ancestors will judge you with mercy, she said quietly. As dawn broke, the first light touched the compound. The spirits faded into the morning mist, the elders sank to the ground, freed from their trance, and the fire turned to smoke. Ebony stood alone at its center, no longer the humiliated bride, but the chosen vessel of her lineage. Her punishment had become her coronation. The days that followed felt like another world had begun. The fear that once clung to the compound dissolved into something gentler, reverence. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings, and every dawn seemed to break brighter than the one before. Ebony spent her mornings by the shrine, tending to the small fire that never went out. Her hair, once shorn in cruelty, now flowed down her back in thick, shining braids, each one threaded with sacred beads that shimmered faintly when touched by sunlight. The women of the village whispered that the ancestors themselves had woven their blessing into every strand. Children began to follow her when she walked to the stream, giggling and bringing her flowers. The old came to her for healing, and her hands, guided by unseen wisdom, soothed fevers and calmed restless hearts. Even the herbs she touched seemed to regain forgotten potency. The priest, once proud and fearful, now came quietly to learn from her, bowing before speaking. Each evening, as the sun bled gold over the horizon, Ebony would sit beneath the sacred tree in the forest, the same tree where her grandmother's charms still rested. The wind there always seemed to hum softly as if whispering her name. She no longer felt alone. The silence that once haunted her now spoke to her in gentle tones, reminding her that strength need not roar, it can bloom quietly and still move mountains. Word of her rebirth spread beyond the village. Traders passing through brought stories of the woman whose hair glows in moonlight, and travelers came seeking her counsel. But Ebony remained humble, speaking little, teaching more through her calm than her words. When she touched someone's hand, they said it felt like being reminded of who they truly were. One afternoon, as she returned from the stream, she found Kalu waiting at the gate of her courtyard. His once proud shoulders were bowed, his clothes plain, his eyes red with sleeplessness. He fell to his knees before her, his voice breaking. Ebony, I was a coward, he said. I watched them break you and did nothing. I feared my mother more than I loved what was right. Forgive me. Ebony looked down at him, her heart steady. For a moment she saw the boy he had once been, kind, uncertain, lost in the shadow of others' power. She reached out and placed her hand on his head. Forgiveness is not mine alone to give, she said softly. But if you carry remorse truthfully, the ancestors will see it. He wept openly, his tears darkening the dust beneath him. Ebony turned toward the shrine, the wind lifting her hair as if to remind her of her journey, from humiliation to grace, from silence to strength. When night fell, the moonlight rested on her braids, and the sacred beads glowed faintly like tiny stars. It was said that wherever she walked, the ground seemed to remember her steps. The woman once stripped of her pride now carried the weight of peace, her hair no longer a symbol of vanity but of rebirth. Generations passed, and the story of Ebony became more than a tale. It became a lesson whispered from mother to daughter, sung by old women as they braided each other's hair under the moonlight. They spoke of the girl whose beauty invited envy, whose pride was mistaken for arrogance, and whose humiliation turned into her anointing. Children listened wide-eyed as their mothers combed their hair and said, "Do not let anyone cut away what the ancestors have blessed, not your voice, not your spirit, not your pride." Ebony's name became a proverb: never mistake humiliation for defeat, for some roots grow strongest when buried. In every village gathering, when women spoke of endurance, they mentioned her. When someone suffered unjustly, they said, "Remember Ebony, whose hair grew through the shame and reached the sky." The wind that once howled through her pain now carried her song, soft, steady, and eternal. Some said that when the rain touched the earth after a long drought, it smelled faintly of the oils she once used on her hair. Others swore that when a woman stood up for her dignity, a shimmer of moonlight caught her braids, blessing her courage. No one ever saw Mama Igioma again. Some said she wandered into the forest and was claimed by the spirits she had tried to deceive. But her name was rarely spoken, for her story was not one of power but of warning. As years folded into centuries, shrines were built where Ebony once walked. Beads were placed there, not in mourning but in gratitude, symbols of the strength she passed down through generations. And so, the legend lived. Of Ebony, the woman whose cut hair did not end her story, it began her legacy. Her spirit, they say, still walks among women who dare to hold their heads high, whose roots remain unbroken, and whose beauty glows not for the world's approval, but for the ancestors' pride.